and Lindsay Parker, welcome to Build. I'm very excited today to have what I'm sure is going to be a fascinating conversation with someone I consider to be one of the great voices and thinkers in rock and roll, Tom Morello. We all, of course, know him from any number of supergroups, Prophets of Rage, Audioslave, and, of course, Rage Against the Machine. But interestingly, he has his first solo record out. It may as well be a supergroup record because it's full of all-stars, but this is his first solo record coming out, The Atlas Underground, under his own name, and I'm excited to talk about it with him. You know, Tom, it's too bad you've lost your edge. Anyway, obviously that's a joke. You have not. Yeah. But as I was mentioning, you obviously have been associated with so many bands for so long, some very important bands. But this is actually your first album that's officially under your own name.
Yeah, that's correct. While this record has a lot of collaborators on it, I wanted to forge a sonic conspiracy of people from the world of rock, punk, hip-hop, and EDM to forge the ambitious goal of making a new genre of music that combined like my Marshall stack heavy metal fury, guitar fury, with some of the electronic elements of 2018 to make something that is both unapologetically rocking and yet speaks to the present.
Absolutely. I love how you word things, because what did you say, sonic...
Conspiracy.
Sonic conspiracy. You also called these songs social justice ghost stories.
Yeah, the lyrical theme that runs through the record is social justice ghost stories, meaning that the heroes and martyrs and those killed unjustly from the past can have voice in these songs to inform the struggles of the present and light a beacon to a more just and humane future.
Well, obviously, whichever side of the political spectrum a person may lie on, we're living through some crazy times right now. Voices like yours are very needed. I'm wondering what specific things were going on in the news cycle and the headlines and the culture in general during the making of this record that were inspiring you. And you can speak to specific tracks like this one as well.
Sure. Well, with this track with Vic Mensa, who's a tremendously talented young rapper from Chicago, who's kind of like the next generation of rebel musicians, I gave him very, very limited poetic direction. I said, make a song that you can stand your ground to. And that was the beginnings of this one. But some of the themes that run through the record and the ghost stories that we're telling in the song Rabbit's Revenge with Killer Mike and Big Boy and Bassnectar, it's the incessant drumbeat of police murders of African Americans. The song Roadrunner with Leap 47, it's those crossing from Mexico to the United States in the deadly desert there where hopes and dreams and death meet, among the coyotes. Then there's, I've always thought that the music can be impactful politically regardless of the lyrics, which is the underpinnings of a lot of this record. The collaborators, Knife Party, Pretty Lights, Bauer, Fantagram, all come from a different sonic world. They all happen to be Rage Against the Machine fans, by the way, but we wanted to really make this brand new alloy, this hybrid of my electric guitar playing and their wizardry.
I understand, since you mentioned the police brutality issue with Rabbit's Revenge, isn't there a organization called Color for Change that you're partnering with?
Sure, yeah, we're partnering with Color for Change on this record. They do great work, like grassroots work that is not in the headlines, and we've worked with them throughout the course of this song, this record, and if they go to the website and stuff, people can integrate with that organization to make real substantive change.
This is a bit of a loaded question, but something I think you've navigated well throughout your career. There are some people that say that musicians or celebrities in general should stay. Sorry, I was so intrigued by what you're saying.
You're not talking to the microphone.
I'll say that again so you guys can hear. You could hear me. Yeah. In a nutshell, there are people who think that musicians or celebrities should stay out of politics, or there's people that, particularly right now with Facebook and everything, just they have outrage fatigue and maybe look to music as more of an escape than wanting music to address political stuff. And we also wonder if it even makes a difference, because we saw for instance, a lot of musicians that really came out for Hillary Clinton. The election, it didn't seem to, people had their mind made up either way about how they were going to vote. What is your take, because I feel you've navigated this well since your Rage days, on that whole issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's the old shut up and play guitar argument. The people who make that argument, 100% of them disagree with your politics. It has nothing to do with, the fact that they want to be able to enjoy, they're drawn to the music perhaps because of the guitar solos, the aggression. They don't want to be bothered by what it is that you think and who you are as a person. My take is very, very simple. When you pick up a guitar, you do not put down your First Amendment rights. And in whatever your vocation, whether it's as an artist or an interviewer or a carpenter or a boom man, or I don't think you should leave your your intrinsic self. You shouldn't leave your convictions behind in your vocation. And if that upsets people, I mean, first of all, if you're making music that everyone can agree on, then you're probably making pretty shitty music. That would be the way that I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. Well, I guess to piggyback onto that question, do you feel, particularly in the times we're going through now, that musicians or celebrities in general have a responsibility to speak out, whichever way they stand?
No, I think that as an artist, you have a very simple and limited responsibility, and that's to tell the truth in what you do as art. If you have convictions and you sublimate them and you don't speak out because you're afraid you won't sell as many records, then I think that that's, you know, you have to look at the mirror at the end of the day, and maybe you can and maybe you can't. I've never had that problem. I've always thought that I'm going to sink or swim. If you're offended by the content, fantastic. That means that I'm hitting a nerve, and I'm being honest and truthful with what it is that I'm saying. Let the chips fall where they may.
That phenomenon you just spoke about some artists being scared because they might lose record sales, is that a more, I mean, I think of the Dixie Chicks, obviously. Do you feel that's a more recent phenomenon?
No, I mean, there are always pressures, subtle and otherwise, to, you know, make music or art as non-offensive as possible. My favorite art is always dangerous, and I think certainly in the world of rock and roll, it definitely should be. And, you know, challenging conventions is what I've been about, you know, since I was 16 or 17 years old. So that's not about to change now. And on this record, The Atlas Underground, I mean, one of the things that I've greatly enjoyed about is working with a wide variety of artists. On this album, there are artists of diverse genres, diverse ethnicities, diverse ages, and diverse genders. And that in and of itself is a statement.
How did you go about recruiting this incredible who's who of people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for some of the, for example, the next single is a song called Every Step That I Take, which is with Portugal the Man and a young EDM producer named Wu-Tang. And I was a big fan of Johnny from Portugal singing. Turns out that he learned to play guitar to the first Rage Against the Machine record. You know, and then you take another song like Find Another Way, which is Marcus Mumford and Fantagram are the collaborators on that one. You know, Marcus and I are both rock dads, and we've torn up the East Village a few times, so we have a lot to sort of talk about there. But, you know, that song to me feels like it's a whispered conversation through a cold stone prison wall. So,
do you mind telling me what that song is about?
Sure. Well, I mean, Marcus would probably flesh it out, but it follows on the theme of the social justice ghost stories and telling the story, being a voice for those who are voiceless, and bringing that message both to the mosh pit and to the dance floor.
Is there any plan to do some kind of crazy Atlas Underground AllStar concert where you get all these people together live?
Yeah, there's definitely a plan. I mean, currently I'm on doing like a tour where it's a lot of talking, playing the record for fans before it comes out, and doing a lot of shredding. But in 2019, there'll be the proper Atlas Underground tour, which, you know, you can't rely necessarily on having Wu-Tang Clan and Marcus Mumford and Steve Aoki, you know, all and Rise Against all there on the same night. So working with some very creative people, Sean Evans, who is the artistic director for the Roger Waters tours, and I are putting something together that we sort of challenge the conventions of what a traditional rock and roll show is, and if somebody's not there, you won't miss them.
Holograms?
There will not be holograms. There will not be holograms.
Okay, good.
I don't really have the budget for. We certainly don't have the budget for holograms, but
no holograms.
We're gonna think a little outside the hologram box. Yeah.
All right. Well, you mentioned that you have a lot of different artists of different ages.
Sure.
And again, a bit of a loaded question, but when I was talking about a bit of the apathy that maybe some people have, do you see among younger artists today a sort of bubbling up of the sort of ethos that Rage had in the days, or even like the 60s protest music? There is the cliche that when times are dark or troubled, that the art gets better, basically.
Sure. Well, I mean, bad presidents make for great music. That's been a constant. That's been a constant throughout history, and we're certainly in a fertile period for that now. But again, I wouldn't just limit it to artists. I would say that these are, we're at a crucial historical crossroads for the planet's. You know, whether or not the planet will survive may very well be at stake. You know, in the next number of years. And the thing I think people need to realize, and your viewers and listeners, is that the people who have changed the world in the past, have changed it when there's been progressive, radical, or even revolutionary change, are no different than you. They don't have any more power, they don't have any more courage, they don't have any more intellect than you do. They've stood up in their place and time, and they've risked in order to make a more humane and just planet, and that's the kind of thing when you are a historical agent, and you can choose to have your hand on the steering wheel, or if you abdicate and you stay on the sidelines, then you let other sons of bitches drive the planet into a ditch. It's up to you.
What is your biggest concern for the world right now? Is it the climate stuff, the planet?
Well, I mean, I think that while there are many from racism to anti-immigrant sentiment to economic injustice, the planet is at a literal crossroads. You know, I have young kids, and I fear for the kind of world they're going to inherit. I would like there to be polar bears and, you know, oceans not swamping Santa Monica, and both those things are in jeopardy right now. But the world doesn't change until we change it.
Are there any songs on this Atlas Underground record that address that topic?
All of them. You know, okay. Indirectly.
Okay.
All of them indirectly. I mean, it's a dangerous time to call for dangerous music, and you know, we're trying on this record to both make something that is sonically revolutionary and a very different kind of hybrid than there's been before, but also, you know, in an artistic way and an intellectual way, bring ideas to both the mosh pit and the dance floor.
Well, it's interesting when you talked about the sonic conspiracy and the mashing up of genres. I assume you have to know that Rage Against the Machine, I feel, were at the forefront of that in the 90s. Do you feel that you planted those seeds? The rap rock hybrid, metal, and
well, certainly before Rage Against the Machine, there were no multi-ethnic, neo-socialist rap, punk, hip hop, metal bands around, and so it wasn't like a formula for commercial success when we put that together. You know, in some ways, this is maybe, you know, the Atlas Underground record is in some ways a 2.0 of that, where it's taking these disparate elements and, you know, that may challenge metal fans or challenge EDM fans in the same way that metal fans and hip hop fans were challenged by Rage Against the Machine. But I've always wanted to challenge myself as both a guitarist, as an artist, to keep pushing the boundaries.
I think if you go back to the early Rage days, sometimes I take it for granted now because I think the 90s were a very fertile time where a lot of really cool stuff was going on. But, I mean, you were on a major label, Rage Against the Machine were. You were on MTV all the time.
Sure.
You were on the radio all the time. I mean, looking back on it, it's kind of crazy that happened. It seems like it's quite against the odds. I don't know if a Rage-type band were to come out now, if it would be the same.
I think there'd be no chance. I mean, it's a very different landscape right now. And the thing about streaming services and all that is that on the one hand, it's much more democratic. That you, me, and everybody here, you know, we put a band together this afternoon, and we can have our song on Spotify and a Facebook page, just like Metallica. So there's that kind of leveling of the playing field in that regard. But having a U2 or a Rage or a Led Zeppelin reaching kind of a global audience in that way, it's unlikely that sort of phenomenon. That phenomenon seems now to be reserved for the sugariest end of the pop spectrum.
Well, I guess that was bringing me to the point I made earlier. If people are sort of gravitating towards sugary pop and maybe possibly for escapist reasons.
Sure, yeah.
Where does the type of stuff you're doing fit in the landscape in terms of getting heard?
Yeah, we're about to find out. I mean, the record comes out on October 12th. I'll let you know. But like I said, I've always made the only responsibility is make something you believe in. This record I believe in as much. It's my 17th studio album of my career, and in some ways, it's a culmination. You know, I've had two things sort of competing ways of making music in my career. One was collaborative, whether it's with Rage, whether it's with Audioslave, Prophets of Rage, or my work with Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band, where there's a chemistry and you create something together that none of you could alone. And then there's also sort of solo work where there's a purity of vision where you create something that no one else could, you know? And this record in some ways is the best of both worlds, where it has like I'm the curator of the artists and the songs in this record, so it has that purity of vision, and yet it relies on the tremendous talents of, you know, Bassnectar, Knife Party, K.Flay, Wu-Tang Clan, these 20 or so collaborators of diverse genres to make a work that harmonizes and is in solidarity.
And you say all of those people were Rage fans. Did they grow?
Yeah, many of them. Yeah.
No, that's great.
One or two were not born at the time, but yeah.
With Spotify.
But I was very surprised. I was very surprised to find that a lot of those artists. I was never a fan of EDM music. Or my understanding of it, I thought it was like Italian taxi cab music, and was very dismissive of it, and just picturing, you know, like pill popping on Ibiza dance floors, which was kind of not what I aspired to. But a metal friend turned me on to Knife Party, and I heard in their music something that was identical to the aggression, the tension, and the release of my favorite hard rock and metal songs. And I said, well, what if we replace your synthesizers with my guitar? We might be able to create something that was completely different and fresh and exciting.
Well, since you mentioned you weren't into EDM when you were younger, and you also mentioned Bruce Springsteen, I'm curious, what were the artists that, particularly ones who had a message, that inspired you when you were growing up and learning to play guitar?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I grew up on sort of escapist metal.
Kiss, I know you love Kiss.
I love Kiss, yeah. But then when it was really the Clash and Public Enemy were the twin cornerstones of realizing that I loved metal, but I was never really down with either the devil or this kind of misogynist lyrics that were a big part of that. But when the Clash was singing about things that I could relate to, and Public Enemy was presenting a worldview that I could also relate to, and they were still kick-ass bands, which was key, And so I thought, okay, perhaps there's room for me to not have to leave my ideas on the sideline and still be able to play some shredding guitar.
Very quick aside, since I mentioned Kiss, and I know you inducted them to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. How are you feeling about this Kiss farewell tour that's going to come up?
Well, I think that Kiss went on their first farewell tour in 1996, so I'm like, I got a feeling it may go on for a while, but was my first concert, my first favorite band. So
it was your first concert?
It was my first concert.
Oh, it's a good one. It's a good one.
My seat was behind a pole, though. It was still very exciting.
But then Gene
the volume came through the pole. I felt the whole thing very clearly.
But then Gene fly over you.
There's a lot of flying and blood spitting and whatnot, so I was hooked.
Well, that kind of escapist stuff is great too. But to get back to serious stuff, are there any particular songs that we haven't talked about yet on the Atlas Underground with messages that are really near and dear to you? That
Sure. I mean, well, the song "Every Step That I Take," which is the single that comes out around the release of the record, we're partnering with an organization that deals with suicide prevention and depression issues. Which in this time, I lost my good friend Chris Cornell in the not too distant past, and it was important to me to have. And there's been some mental health issues in my own family, and sort of removing that stigma and letting people know that there is a way to get help. Whether your friends, loved ones, and plenty of organizations that you can reach out to.
Well, that's interesting because I feel I wonder if you agree that lately, I'd say literally just in about the last year, the national conversation about mental health awareness, and wellness is really escalated in a way I haven't heard. People are actually talking about it. The stigma's slowly being eroded.
Yeah, and I think that's very, very key because a lot of people will suffer in silence when they know that something's not right, and for fear of the shame that in the past has been associated with something that is nothing shameful. It's like if you break an arm, you're not ashamed to go and get the bone set. In the same way that if you have feelings of depression or have addiction or suicidal feelings, that there are ways to get help.
Are there any other songs I feel like we could go down every single one.
You name one and I'll pick one. I mean, the song with Wu-Tang Clan, Lead Poisoning, is another one that deals with, the police brutality. The song with K.Flay, Lucky One, if I had one wish for the world, it would be that everyone could be the person that they were meant to be. But often that is not the case. Sometimes it's crushing poverty or circumstance that keeps like the person who, the next Mozart, might be slaving away in a Vietnamese sweatshop right now. So or the doctor who could cure cancer might be in an Alabama prison for having weed in their car. So there's that song in particular, Lucky One, deals with who dies first and who laughs last and who is the lucky one.
So it's sort of addressing the just overall concept of privilege, which some people
don't
think is a thing.
Privilege and inequality, and I feel very blessed that I've somehow managed. I believe I was probably meant to be an activist guitar player, and here I am. So, making sure that everybody has that opportunity is it's sort of at the core of at the core of all social justice work.
I know we have so many collaborators on this album, but I'm curious. I know you must know everyone, basically. Who are your dream collaborators that maybe if you do another Atlas Underground too? I'm working on more music, and I don't want to give away too many of them, but from both the world of some unexpected ones, maybe touching on the world of pop, to super metal. I like keeping the doors open, and it was such a fun and liberating process to, on the one hand, kind of let go a little bit of my type A behavior, and sort of having the only criteria be like the song's done when Steve Aoki and Rise Against, and I say it's done. We think it's great together. That song in particular was like a really interesting one. Steve has a history in hardcore punk rock music. You might not guess it, but that's where he knows the lyrics. He likes Gorilla Biscuits. And stuff like that.
Every Rage song. So I contacted him and I sent him a riff tape. I sent him like these 10 riffs and crazy guitar ideas, and he hit me back in a couple of days saying, "I've got a version of the track. I'd like to FaceTime you and play it for you." I'm like, I'm running around. Could you just text it to me? He's like, no, I want to see your face when you hear it. So I had to wait till I got home, and here I am in my living room moshing, to FaceTime, and he's in his studio in Vegas one-man mosh pit there. And I was like, this sounds great. Like, who should we approach to sing on it? He's like, I really love Tim from Rise Against, and I really love Dave Grohl. I said, okay, cool. I'll text them both, and the first one to hit me back gets the gig. And Tim hit me back.
So Dave Grohl on the next one.
Dave will be maybe on the next. I love Dave. He'll be on the next one.
All right. Well, I want to make sure you have a lot of fans here who have questions for you as well. So I make sure we have time for that. Who do we have over here?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I was going to ask a question. I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for being unapologetic. I want to thank you for that guitar at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that said Arm the Homeless, for being fearless, for being brave, and giving Woody Guthrie a really hot guitar lick. That was amazing.
Well, thanks very much.
I just really appreciate you.
Thanks very much. That's very kind of you to say. And I'd like to say that I have to give a lot of credit to my mom, who I was raised by a single mother, who was a granddaughter of a coal miner who raised a black kid in an all-white town. And today is actually her 95th birthday, and she's still the most radical member of the Morello family. So happy birthday, Mom.
Over here.
Hi.
Hello.
What is the evolution you've noticed, not just in your music, but in yourself, when it comes to your just personal perspective on the world, let alone political, but just on the world?
Yeah. I'd say that it's probably changed some since I had children, and my drive was to create big music and to affect the world in big way, in really substantive ways. And once I had kids, I didn't have a father that was present. I found that now some of the most satisfying and most meaningful moments are the smallest ones, and that kind of connection and imbuing the next generation with sort of a sense of pride in self, love in self, and to instill in them the ability to go out there and empathy to go out there in the world and be the next generation of world changers, because that's what we're going to need. And I'm a Little League coach. I'm a hell of a Little League coach, too. Let me tell you that.
I believe we're out of time, but I do want to ask you one more question on that. Because you were saying that the next generation is going to move things forward, and you were talking earlier in this interview about how all of us can be activists. You obviously have a bigger platform, a bigger voice, being a celebrity, being a musician. But what can the average person do to make change?
Yeah. I mean, well, the first thing you really need to realize, it is the average person that has made change has always come from below, whether in our own country it was women's right to vote or the desegregation of lunch counters, in Europe with the fall of the Berlin Wall, or in South Africa with the dismantlement of apartheid. That didn't happen through the wisdom of presidents or the judicious study of Supreme Courts. It was people whose names never made the news, who were never in a newspaper article, who did the tireless organizing, and they like, I grew up in a tiny town in Illinois where the dream was to get a job at the Dairy Queen and then maybe go to University of Illinois. And then I started realizing there's a world that's much bigger. And so my friends and I, we made an underground paper in our high school that told we talked about apartheid, Central American death squads, and the fact that the dean was a dick. And that was just a very liberating thing, and recognizing that I'm an independent agent who can affect things, and if it's just a school newspaper. But once you realize that you have that power, really the sky's the limit. That's the way the world's always changed. So counting on you.
Awesome.
Or
Thank
form
you.
your own
Very
band.
inspiring.
All right, there we go.
Thank you so much. This has been a really inspiring conversation. Thank you, everybody, for watching and watching at home.
Okay, thanks. Cheers. All right.